greetings, everybody, and welcome once again to the Rec Poker Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Fredlund. Today is a packed and a long episode, so hopefully you can enjoy the entire thing or pick and choose what it is that you'd like to listen to. But I've got a few announcements, some exciting things going on with some sponsorships for the future. I want to introduce next week we're going to be starting the Jonathan Little book study. I want to share a couple things that I've learned along the way, even though I won't get into too much depth, but people have been asking me, hey, what have you learned as part of the podcasting thing? So I want to share that. And then I've got a quick interview with Chris Hanson, who's the host of Poker Night in America. And then I also have an interview with Jim LeVoir, who's the tournament director at Running Aces, who just came back from the TDA summit in Las Vegas, and so he's going to share some of the rule changes and some of those things that do apply to players, and also get into a few other things related to being a TDA or a tournament director at Running Aces. So to start off, just a couple of quick announcements. As you know, Running Aces is the official sponsor of the Rec Poker Podcast, which is awesome. But we've just brought on 3 other partners because we're going to be reformatting. And this, like I said, we're going to be doing this book study over the next few weeks. And then after that, we're reformatting. We're really going to get deep into strategy. And we're going to hear from some of the best voices, some of the most forward-thinking, advanced players right now on specific strategy things. So I think a lot of you are going to be super excited about that. But as part of that, we've taken on 3 other partners. First of all, Next Level Poker is a new tour that's being worked on by Chris Wallace and Brian Soja, and they are the official tour of the Rec Poker Podcast, so we're going to be partnering with them in a number of different ways, but including you're going to hear their voices and some of their expertise when it comes to specific strategy things going forward, so that's super exciting. We're also partnering with the Poker is Fun Tour. This is a new tour launched by Mike Schneider, Schneids, as you know. And all of those guys, Fox, Brian Soja, and Mike Schneider, have been interviewed before on the Rec Poker Podcast. So go back, hear what they have to say, and you'll realize pretty quickly how great this is that we're going to be in partnership with both Next Level Poker as well as the Poker is Fun Tour. And then we have also officially partnered with PokerCoaching.com. This is run by Jonathan Little, and Jonathan is also going to be a voice on the Rec Poker Podcast going forward. So you're going to hear a lot of specific advice and strategy information from Jonathan Little. So all of those voices you're going to be hearing a lot more from on the Rec Poker Podcast, but we're still going to be also hearing from other great players that we know that we have relationship with, as well as many recreational players. So you'll continue to hear voices from across the board, but super excited about those sponsorships. And as I mentioned before, next week we're going to be recording and playing a book discussion. Several of us, about a dozen to 15 of us, are getting together, and we are doing a book study on Jonathan Little's book, Secrets of Professional Tournament Poker, Volume 1. And so next week we're going to be airing the first part of that discussion, which we expect to be chapters 1 through 4. So if it's a book that you have or a book that you're interested in, I would recommend go out there, get the book, listen to it, or listen to it on audio or read it. Think about that, and then listen to the discussion, and I think you'll enjoy that. But I don't think you need to have read the book to enjoy the discussion. We're going to be talking a lot about some of the things that we agreed with that were new insights and some of the things that we're not so sure about. And I expect that to be a great conversation. So that's what's coming up over the next few weeks. With that, we also have audio from Jonathan on each of those sections. So we'll take the recreational discussion and we'll pair that with Jonathan's input, and it should be a pretty good series of episodes going forward. As far as my own takeaways, at some point I want to spend some time really digging into this and sharing some of the stuff with you. But as a recreational player who has now had the opportunity to have incredible conversations with some great players, and a lot of the times I have a chance to talk to them off the air as well. So from a selfish perspective, I've gotten to know them a little bit and also gotten some more insights. But let me take the chance just to thank those who have done the on-air interviews. Obviously, Mike Schneider, Chris Wallace, Vlad Revniaga, Aaron Johnson, Mark Hodge, Steve Olson, Ku Vang, Jason Seitz, Matt Hamilton, John Redding, Joe Bernard, Brian Soja, Zach Elwood, Hunter Sitchie, Jonathan Kim. Thank you guys so much for doing the on-air interviews, and then thanks also to all the recreational players who have had voices on the air as well. It's just been fantastic. But from all of those interviews, from all those discussions, I'd say there's a few key things that come out for me. One is the idea of patience and just really waiting for good spots. And I think first of all, understanding what good spots are, and then being patient and waiting for them. And that's been a key over the last couple of months. I've had a lot of success on the felt, and I'd say that's probably the number one factor in that has been my patience and waiting for those good spots, and then not being afraid to take those spots. And sometimes they don't work out, but being patient and aggressive, I would say, has been a key to that. I would say also intentionally thinking about opening ranges. As I'm thinking about entering a pot, what are those ranges that are sort of the defaults that I would go to for the position that I'm in and the table dynamics, and then adjusting those for the different players, the stack sizes, the turning situations. And I think being intentional about thinking about that rather than just looking at the cards and going, ooh, that seems good. Really knowing before I look at the cards what ranges I'm going to get involved in this hand with has been really, really important to me. Bet sizing as well. I've been thinking a lot more as I put in bets. Well, first of all, what am I trying to do with the bet? Am I trying to get people to fold? Am I trying to get people to call? Am I trying to, try to get them to re-raise me? Trying to build a pot? What's actually happening here? And then what's the right size to do that? And then balancing what I'm trying to accomplish and maximizing value with minimizing risk. Can I accomplish the same thing I'm trying to do with less chips? Or if I'm trying to get paid, what's the maximum that I can get this person to call with? So those sorts of intentionalities around bet sizing have been really important for me. The idea of significant bluffing being very rare has been good for me. It seems like every tournament there's one or two times I'd really try to run a pretty significant, bluff, maybe some kind of a 3-barrel with air, with nothing, and realizing that should be a super rare situation, and trying to reduce that in my game. And I think that's helped me quite a bit as well, just because the downside risk of running that is so much worse than the upside potential in most cases. So really just, if it's a great opportunity, I'll take it, but trying to take that out of my game a bit more. Recognizing that I should be playing medium hands less aggressively. So if I have, say, top pair, even just top pair with an ace kicker, but top pair, okay kicker, top pair bad kicker, medium pair, some of those medium hands, playing them less aggressively and even checking one or two streets for pot control. I think that's been good. Now, obviously, you get drawn out sometimes, but I think in the long run, that's a better play and not really going to war with a one pair or medium strength hand. I think it helps in pot control, but it also helps underrepresent your hand. And so a lot of times, checking the turn with a medium strength hand sends a message of weakness to your opponent, and they often take a stab at it, at which point you can just call and you actually get more value than had you continued. So in the situations where you're beat, I think it actually controls the pot. In the situations where you're ahead, it often can get you more chips. But either way, I think it reduces variance in your game. And I think that's a good thing long term, at least my understanding. Another thing is playing my big hands more aggressively. And first of all, realizing that an overpair to the board is not a big hand. It's still one pair. It's a medium strength hand. It's a good medium strength hand, but it's still not a huge hand. But when I do have big hands, I've been trying to play more aggressively, and that's actually helped me. Flopping straights, flopping sets, flopping two pair. Instead of trying to get all sneaky with those, typically just play it the same way I might play a bluff, and I tend to get paid off more. And in fact, I was trying this, and both times in the last tournament where I flopped a big hand and I just let out, I got re-raised. And so it's not always going to be the case, but it actually worked quite a bit for me. Plus, it reduces the risk of being drawn out on. So that's something. Also, with weaker hands, just playing them more aggressively or just giving up. And just realizing that it's okay to fold even if I have chips already invested. So, let's say I raise and I hit middle pair or bottom pair, and I continuation bet, and they call. At some point, it's okay just to give up on the hand. And in the past, I'd be much more married to that, saying, well, I've got chips invested, I have to go. Now, there might be situations where you stay involved, but it's okay to give up on pots once in a while. At the end of the day, I want to make each decision from a correct expected value or expected utility perspective, rather than saying, okay, my goal is to win this pot. I think you can get yourself in a lot of trouble trying to win the pot versus trying to make the right decision along the way. And also, I know position is critical. I've known that for quite some time. It's kind of the first thing I learned about Hold'em, and people keep talking about it. But the more I play, the more I talk to people, the more of my experience, I realize how critical it is. In terms of being able to control the pot size, it's huge. To be able to win pots when nobody else hits is huge. To float people, to put them to the test, to catch bluffs, to build a pot when you want to build a pot. All of those things. So it's not just about the additional information that you get. It's also a number of other factors. So when you lose, you tend to lose less, and when you win, you tend to win more, is what I found in position. So position, and that to me is a big part of opening hand ranges, feeding into that as well. And then a couple other things. I have a plan. One of the things I've been trying to do more of, it's still not natural, is before I do something, think through what am I going to do if. And the one area that I've improved on at least is looking at what if somebody shoves over the top of me. So even though I don't always have a plan that's more comprehensive than that, at least thinking about that. What if I get re-raised or shoved on? And that drives me to look at people's stacks before I take action and just know if I put in 11,000 here and they shove for the 40,000 that they have, I'm willing to fold. Or conversely, if they have 25,000, just know if they shove, I'm going to call. Just knowing that going in helps me decide what my action is going to be. So that's a big thing, to think forward and continue to push myself to think forward in more and more ways. And the other thing that I want to talk about more in detail at some other point is this idea of expected value versus utility theory. Utility is really about looking at the overall big picture. So expected value is a very mathematical thing where your upside is worth just as much as your downside. So you make a decision that just says, what's my expected value in this situation? But if you think about utility theory, is more like thinking about an ICM or independent chip model sort of perspective, where the curve is actually not linear. So if you're a mathematical person, think of a graph. And along the x-axis, along the bottom, is how many chips you have. And it starts at 0 and it goes all the way to infinity, I guess. And up the y-axis, up the vertical axis, is what's the value of that stack in the tournament. And so that's actually got a curve to it. So starting at 0, as you have more chips, those are worth more and more, and then it sort of marginally decreases as you get higher and higher in the chip count. And so your value curve is actually a curve. It's not linear. And so depending on where you are in the curve, that's why if you have a ton of chips, if you're a massive chip leader, whether you win or lose the pot doesn't really matter to your overall value in the tournament. But if you have very few chips and the options are either going busted or doubling, those are very different results in terms of your value. And so you have to kind of know that. And so as you're thinking about your decisions, I think thinking about linear expected value, I don't think is always a good thing to do in a tournament. And so I want to talk about that at some point. I've got some pretty cool insights, some pretty good initial examples, but just something that I've been thinking about quite a bit as not only ICM from a final table chop type of perspective, but throughout the stages of the tournaments, I think that utility of value is something that's very important to think about. So those are just a few of my things that I've been thinking about. Thanks for listening. If you fast forwarded through that, that's fine too. But we'll get into some of those later. But obviously part of this is for myself to learn the game as much as I can. And I've been doing that. And I've been having some success. And I thank a lot of the folks that have been involved in this podcast for helping to make that happen. So that's it for that. Reminder again, next week, Jonathan Little Book Club starts. And now what we're going to do is we're going to transition into, I guess, a 15, 20-minute interview or so that I had with Chris Hanson from Poker Night in America. And after that, you will hear from Jim LeVoir, who's the tournament director at Running Aces. Thanks, everybody. Running Aces Casino and Racetrack has the best poker room in Minnesota, featuring 24/7 promos on all cash poker games, including earning $2 per hour in comps, plus the most player-friendly tourney structures. Visit runaces.com for daily promotions and the tournament calendar. Running Aces Casino and Racetrack, the official sponsor of Rec Poker. Well, I am here. I am joined with Chris Hanson via Skype. Thanks so much for joining us, Chris.
No problem. It's great to be on finally.
Yeah, I know. We had to work our schedules back and forth, and we finally got a hold of you, and then I had Skype issues, and so we finally landed the big fish.
Yeah, well, if I'm the big fish, you should keep on fishing.
Yeah. Well, we are a small podcast. Yeah, we'll keep on fishing. We'll use you as bait, maybe.
There you go.
So now you're joining us. Are you in Fargo right now?
Yeah, at home in Fargo, and actually going to be on my way to the golf course here very soon. That's pretty much where you find me all summer long.
Nice. And you were talking about off air a little bit that there's the poker sort of has the pre-World Series and the post-World Series, right? And
yeah, that's exactly it. I think a lot of people, get the start of the year and a brand new year, and a lot of great events happen before the World Series. Then it seems like once the World Series starts, everything else kind of goes on pause for a moment because it, rightfully so, sucks all the air out of the room. But now with the new world champion, and now we kind of get into that fall and winter season of traveling with poker.
Yeah, now I know you from Poker Night in America. That's where I've seen you, and you're gracious enough to connect with me through Twitter. But tell me a little bit more about your involvement in the poker world, either as a player, as a commentator. Are you involved with the World Series at all? Give us a little bit of background on your world of poker beyond just Poker Night in America. And I know you do other things outside of the poker world too.
Yeah, well, as far as poker goes, I started out like so many people did, playing, when I was younger, and playing through high school, and then got into college. And obviously, in the years 2002, 2003, kind of got into it. And then 2004 with everybody else, was all gung-ho and spent way too much money on trying to learn how to play the game the right way. And so my poker career, it's funny, ever since I started doing poker television shows, my poker has gotten really good, and then it just absolutely fell off a cliff. And now the amount of poker I play is it's pretty minimal, other than when we travel for Poker Night in America. So as far as my poker career goes, I've got nothing on Hendon Mob. I've got no huge scores, but I'm definitely a lover of the game, and I'm a lover of the more of the kind of like the lifestyle that goes with the game and the different nuances of personalities with the game. That's what I'm really into, is getting to meet so many different people and just kind of seeing what makes them tick. And so as far as poker goes, nothing with the big winning scale, but I've definitely been around a block or two when it comes to the world of poker, being in it now for almost 15 years into poker television.
And how much do you travel with Poker Night in America?
Poker Night in America does anywhere from 8 to 10 events per year, and so I travel, frequently with that. There have been some events that, due to restrictions or just conflicts in schedule, that I haven't been able to go to. But the thing is that when we're on site, there's really not all that much for myself to do, other than to just basically, like I said, get to know some of the players a little bit better. So my role on set during the actual filming would be very minimal. That most of my work, and then also the work of Joe Stapleton, my co-host, is all done. It's all done post here in Fargo in post production.
Well, and he had kind of a fun World Series. It was fun to see him a little bit on the TV.
Yeah, dude, got all kinds of exposure and got all kinds of, I keep waiting for those phone calls that they need some help for me to come out. But I guess with Stapes there, they had enough pretty faces.
Well, I think you're just not quirky enough.
Either that, or I'm definitely not at the level of a David Tuckman or a Stapes or any of the other people who are obviously very good at playing poker. As I said, my role really isn't as a person who's there, and it never really has been, to offer astute poker skill-based commentary. I'm just more there for the, to keep the game flowing, to kind of be the, MC for a show, and it really just, kind of keep the action moving. And I think that has been, that's been my role in my poker career.
Yeah, and you do a great job of that. Seriously, like it's so interesting. Poker Night America, for those that don't watch it, I mean, check it out. It's kind of all over the place, and it's an interesting combination of, I can really watch the hands, and I can watch what's being done there and really get into some of the strategy of it, but at the same time be entertained by what you guys are talking about. And so I think it's interesting because I like the strategy more, but yet I'm entertained, but yet there's enough of the hands shown that I can actually maybe pick up some tips on that.
Well, the thing about Poker Night in America is that when it started, when Todd Anderson, after both Todd and I left Heartland Poker Tour, that we were, with that from the very beginning. Yeah. And after all that, that transpired of the sale of that and moving on, that we both said, let's kind of do something a little bit different, and let's focus on some of that lifestyle stuff of the poker. Let's get to know some of these people a little bit better, where really the avenues where you saw your favorite professional poker players. And I'm talking about Helmuth and Antonio Esfandiari and, all the biggest names. You would see them in usually one of two capacities. You would see them either playing tournament poker, or you would see them playing very high-stakes cash game poker.
Yeah.
And that was really about it, that you would see them, grinding on the World Series on WPT, and then you would see them playing, nosebleed kind of stakes. So the Poker Night in America was born with the idea of, let's play a dollar amount that is still, there's some bragging rights to it, and there is some money to be won for some of the big pros, but at the same time playing at a level that, for a lot of them that play that $5,000 to $20,000 buy-in, let's be honest, it's not a lot of money to them, but yet at the same time they want to always beat their peers. And so that's what Poker Night was born from, was let's get a cash game that isn't nosebleed, so they're not, just absolutely grinding every decision, that they're maybe willing to gamble and let their personality show. And then, starting to bring in other, like James Woods or Jennifer Tilley or, other Brad Garrett, having them on the show to provide some, comedy and some good poker too. But, basically just some more personality to the show.
When you see things like Brad Garrett buying in for all red chips and some of these sort of crazy things. And, one of the things I'm enjoying is the Jennifer Tilley and Jason Mercier battle, and her just never able to call him when he doesn't have it and calling him when he's got it, and some of these some of these interesting dynamics that emerge over time. And I'm curious, you talked about the personality. You really do get to see the personality of even a guy like a Sean Deeb, who I see him in a very different light than I would have otherwise. But like, who are some of your favorite personalities that have emerged through the years of doing this?
Probably one of the people that I remember meeting him for the first time, and I'm like, I always thought that you were kind of like nerdy, quirky, but yet at the same time cool. And then you find out he's just a down-to-earth dude, and I love him. And it's Tom Schneider.
Oh,
Donkey Bomber. He's just such a great guy, and we've had a lot of conversation, and we both love golf, and so we played some golf on the road, and he is a blast to be around. And then, a guy like another personality is Gavin Smith. Gavin can be one of those guys that some people love him and some people hate him, and whatever you think of him, deep down he's got a heart of gold. He's been a lot of fun to get to know over the years. And Sean himself, I mean, look, that's the thing about this game, man, is that there are so many great personalities that unfortunately you don't get to see a lot of it because, they, like I said, they're either playing for their tournament life or they're playing for unreal high, nosebleed type of buy-ins, that it's been so great to get to know a lot of these players. But I'd say that when I first met Donkey Bomber 5-6 years ago, that I always saw the loud jackets and the loudmouth stuff that he has on. And I really like his personality, and he's so laid back and down to earth, and he's probably one of my better friends from Poker Night.
And it's cool, even doing on a much smaller scale. What I'm doing is Rec Poker. I get a chance to interview a lot of these players who you maybe just see them playing in the seriousness, and you get a chance to kind of peel that back a little bit and see some of the personality. And I think that can really be a big win as recreational players are trying to get into the game more, as we're trying to recruit more people to play. They see that these people have a personality, and they're actually, a lot of them are very down-to-earth people.
For sure, and I'm glad you brought that fact up, because that is one thing that has for a lot of people is that the thing about poker is that the good poker players don't feed off of each other. The good poker players feed off of the bad poker players. Okay, that's just the way it's always been. But at this point in the game of poker, I think there are more good players than you could have ever imagined. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that for a lot of people, that intimidation factor is bigger than ever, that they really I've seen a lot of different instances with amateur players and people who are, pros wherever we travel around the country. And it just does absolutely no good to scare that amateur recreational player away. And, a lot of those people want to play for the fun of it. That's why I got started. That's why a lot of people got started into it. And some of that fun, I hate to say it, but I have seen across the country in some of my travels, some of that fun for a lot of people has started to dissipate. And that's too bad, because a lot of those people are the ones who, are driving the game. They're the ones who are bringing fresh money, fresh blood, and fresh attitudes. If they go home and say, "Oh, I had the worst time at the casino. This guy was such an a-hole. We're playing 1-2 no limit," and it's just I hate to see that, but unfortunately, I think you do see that more than most of us would like to care to admit.
Yeah, I've got a big collection of people that are kind of like me, that like to go to the casino, that like to play home games, and I'd say there's, of that big group of people, there's probably maybe 30 of them that hardly ever, if ever, go to a casino, primarily because of that. They went there once, they made a play that was iffy, they got berated, and they're like, I just want to play for fun, I'm just going to play home games. And so I think there's this huge audience of people that would just take that next step to play the $30 or $50 tournament, and then if that goes well, they'd keep continuing up the ranks and ultimately be playing some of the bigger stuff. But yeah, ultimately they're playing for fun, and it's not fun to go and nobody will talk, or if you make a bad play, they'll make some comment. I mean, it's just so interesting, because those are the people that the good players should want there, but they push them away, and it's an interesting dynamic.
Like the old saying always used to be, "Don't tap on the tank."
Yeah,
the worst thing you can do is to let the fish know that they are fish by tapping on their tank. Just leave them alone.
Exactly.
And I am one of those people. Do not think that I'm looking from the other end of it. I'm looking from the bottom up. And and I've spread plenty of money around to plenty of different people with my terrible play. But you know what? The last thing I need is for you to tell me how terrible I am.
Right, you should be encouraging me.
Exactly.
You should be saying, "Wow, that was a gutsy play. I like that."
Wow, gee whiz, yeah. Well, maybe next time.
Bluffing the 4 high is a good play there.
Well, because as we know, that sometimes in that game, when you think that you're doing the right thing, which is the absolute wrong thing, with the turn of a couple of cards can turn into the right thing, and that just makes people go crazy.
Yeah, well, that's what keeps the bad players like myself in the game, is that once in a while positive variance can hit, and we win a tournament, and it keeps us coming back.
Yep, I agree.
Hey, so quick question. We were talking about personalities a little bit, and then I want to get into some of the other stuff. I know we don't have much time, but I'm always curious about Phil Locke. I watch him. Sometimes he seems insane. Sometimes he seems like probably one of the smartest guys in the world. Sometimes he seems really down to earth. What's the skinny on Phil?
I would take more of the angle of smartest guys on earth. He's one of those just wildly brilliant people that I think that no matter what he might put his mind to, I think he could definitely do it. And he is, a lot of that, contacting the mothership and wearing the goggles right. And, the stuff that you see him do on Poker Night in America. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of method to that madness, but at the same time, there still is some madness that is going on in Phil. And Phil and both Jennifer Tilley have been huge supporters of Poker Night in America and have, done things for us and helped us out and been to so many events to help us get started. And I would have forever be, especially Jennifer. She's not the world-class player that Phil is, but she keeps coming back and back and back. And that's the thing about this game, is that you can love it and you can hate it so much at the same time. So Phil Locke is a great dude. And like I said, there's some madness, but there's also some method to some of that madness.
Talk a little bit about other stuff that you do. Now, I wasn't even aware of this until I started researching you a little bit, which I know sounds creepy, but that you're actually involved doing some on-air stuff. You got a little radio show. You're also doing some stuff with NDSU football. What else do you do besides the poker broadcasting?
Well, besides Poker Night in America, for the past 16 years, I've been co-host of Chris, John, and Jane in the Morning, which is a radio show here in Fargo that's on a country station. It's called Bob 95 FM. And this fall will actually be 20 years that I've been involved with radio, which is hard to believe because they don't normally give jobs to kids when they're 9 years old. So I don't know how I've already been in this gig for 20 years. But so I do that every day on a daily basis from 5:30 to 9 a.m. We're on the air. And then, weekend time that's when we fly away for poker events. And then, after I would get done doing a radio show, would leave, that studio at 11 o'clock. And then meet the guys from Poker Night in America here in Fargo in our post-production studios. And we will, when Joe Stapleton comes to town, we will bang out 8 to 10 hours per day for 2 or 3 days in a row of producing Poker Night in America. So not only that on the radio, that I've also been involved, I'm a big North Dakota State University Bison football fan. I went to NDSU. I've been a fan since I was a little kid. And the last year and now this year again have an opportunity to be part of the pre- and post-game show with North Dakota State University football. And so being a part of that is, I hate to say it, but it's a dream come true.
Yeah.
But it definitely is.
Well, you keep picking winning programs. That's a pretty good program to be behind. And
It is. It's been pretty good the last 5 or 6 years. Really good.
My brother went to NDSU, and my son was looking at it. It was one of his top choices. He ended up going to the University of Minnesota, but we were up there on a campus tour, and holy cow, have they done some renovations. It's just a gorgeous campus. If you guys are out there listening and you got kids thinking about school, I'd say go take a look at that. It's not what the NDSU remember from 25 years ago.
Well, and I just read an article today that it was one of the top, that Fargo-Moorhead is one of the top 25 college towns in America, and it's because of the population, the total population as to the student population. NDSU had 15,000 students. Minnesota State University Moorhead, over across the river in Moorhead, I believe has like 8,000 students, and Concordia has like 3,000 students. Yeah. So you start talking to, there's 30,000-ish college students in the Fargo-Moorhead area, and so the cities definitely do run on the college kids that are here. That's for sure.
Yeah, you can get a pretty good bison burger on campus too. I found out.
Yes, you can. You go to one of my favorite spots in town called Herd and Horns, right south of campus.
Yeah,
and you'll get some good grub. And obviously Carson Wentz getting drafted last year by the Eagles really put NDSU on the map after winning 5 national championships in a row. In the FCS level. So there's a lot of great things that are happening in Fargo, and North Dakota becoming known for its football as well as, the fracking out west.
Right, exactly. Hey, so we only got a couple minutes left, but I'd love to talk just really briefly, if we can, a little bit of poker strategy in terms of, most of our listeners are recreational players playing a few times a month, home games, small casino games. We do have some listeners that play the bigger stuff too, but I'm curious, what you see on a day in and day out basis, your history playing poker, as far as what advice do you have for newer players, either in terms of tools they should add to their game or things they should just stop doing?
Well, I probably should have tried to coin this phase at one time, but my total belief in poker for years and years and years is there's plenty of skills that you can learn within the game of poker. But basically what it boils down to is the game of poker is putting yourself in the best position to either A, win, or B, get lucky. Okay, so don't do things that are going to get you hypothetically into trouble. The classic things that chasing a flush on a paired board, those little type of things. The classic, top 10 rules, if you would. Don't commit those rule violations, but put yourself in a position where, okay, the odds of me getting lucky here or hitting my outs or whatever you have. That, to me, is what the game of poker is all about, is that there's plenty of good players and there's plenty of ways for you to get good where you're playing statistically how you should be playing. But then you have to look at the flip side of that is get yourself in a good position to be lucky. Because so much of that is, you're going to have to get lucky in the game of poker. Your skill will take you so far, but you got to be in that right position to get lucky. And you know what? Sometimes maybe that is your belief that a 10% or 15% position is a good enough position to get lucky. But why not try to make that a 25 or a 30% chance to get lucky? So to me, my philosophy when I play poker is I want to put myself in the best possible scenario to get lucky. And
like
because the skill will come. The skill, if you have it, is there. As long as you stay away from the major pitfalls, put yourself in good positions, and I think you'll definitely see your poker game improve. I wish I could listen to myself on maybe some of my own advice, but and pay attention to what everyone else is doing. Is that, sometimes you look around the table and see what people are doing. I'm not trying to say that you should mimic what people are doing at the table, but if there's somebody who's successful at the table and they're winning, they're probably winning for a reason. So pay attention to what they're doing. We get so wrapped up sometimes in poker and wins and losses that sometimes when we lose, we will look at somebody and think, how are they doing this? And you might have only seen a couple of hands they played. Well, they're probably pretty good players, especially if they can. Anybody can accumulate chips, but the rubber really hits the road when you can start to hold on to your chips.
Right.
You know what I mean? So pay attention to the people around you. Don't be afraid to ask people questions and, get involved. If it's something you want to get into and you want to be a winning player, it doesn't happen just by going to the casino and not thinking about it. Becoming a winning player does take some work.
And I think that's so good. One of the points that you made in there, sweet. One of the points that you made in there, which I thought was really good, was go ahead and ask people. It's amazing how much people are willing to share, even good players, because we're all trying to grow the game, or a lot of us are. Like I've asked some of the top players, on break or whatever, boy, what would you have done there? And I think they're being honest, but they'll actually share with me some advice.
Well, and that's the thing is that that there are certain people that that poker has become, we've shut ourselves in so much that everyone's worried about, an image or their headphones or, not saying the wrong thing. But at the same time, there's so much information that we could share with each other that I think a lot of people maybe are due to intimidation or by they don't want to be perceived as dumb if they, if they start asking questions. But as soon as you get over that and you get into the realm of, well, how should I have played that differently, and start to analyze your own game, you're probably going to see some improvement.
Totally agree. All right, so I want to let you go, but just if you have any parting words, that's great. Otherwise, how can people connect with you through social media?
Yeah, if you want to check me out on Twitter, it's the Chris Hanson with an O, at the Chris Hanson, and that's probably the easiest way to catch up with me. And I've been in the poker game a long time and met a lot of great people. I've even met a couple of terrible people. But the thing is that, and truly, the thing is that we are all people, and the sooner we start being kinder and gentler to one another and supporting one another in a way that is constructive, man, I tell you what, we will be a much better, not only game of poker, but society in general is just start. You know what? Treat people with the respect that you think you deserve.
Love it, man.
If you treat people with the because everyone, oh, you're disrespecting me, you're saying this. Treat people with the amount of respect that you think you deserve. You're in the clear, man.
Good stuff. Well, thanks for taking the time, Chris. I know we were kind of packing you between a few different things, but seriously, appreciate your time and hope we can connect in the future.
Yeah, and check us out on Poker Night in America. It's Monday nights on CBS Sports Network. You can always see a couple of different episodes. Though usually one new and one rerun every week on CBS Sports Network on Monday nights.
Love it. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Yes, thank you so much. Have a great day. Thanks for having me on anytime.
All right. Appreciate it.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Running Aces Casino and Racetrack has the best poker room in Minnesota, featuring 24/7 promos on all cash poker games, including earning $2 per hour in comps, plus the most player-friendly tourney structures. Visit runaces.com for daily promotions and the tournament calendar. Running Aces Casino and Racetrack, the official sponsor of Rec Poker. All right, everybody, I am joined right now by Tournament Director at Running Aces, Jim LeVoir. Jim, man, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Steve.
Been excited to, obviously, gotten to know you quite a bit, playing all that I do at Running Aces, and know a little bit about who you are and what you got going on in your world, and I have a ton of respect for you, so excited to finally get you on the program as Running Aces is our official sponsor, and you had a big part in making that happen, so thanks for that.
Yeah, I appreciate it, too. I was glad we could make it happen.
But one of the cool things that's going on now that I thought would be a great opportunity to kind of give
recreational players a behind the curtains look a little bit is you just came back from the TDA summit, and so we thought, hey, let's get you on, and you had some great thoughts on this, and get you on to kind of share what was your experience at the summit. Were there any rule changes that were debated, or any new decisions that people should be aware of, and how does that impact people specifically at Running Aces, but maybe even around the country? And so I'll just kind of turn it over to you, and you can share whatever you want from the summit and how it impacts folks at Aces.
Sure. So it went from June 30th to July 1st. It was held at the Aria. First time actually setting foot in the Aria. I haven't been to Vegas since 2008, before Aces opened. A good friend of mine, we went out there kind of as a last hurrah. It was a buddy's wedding, but we went out there before we went into training class to become dealers at Running Aces. So,
okay.
My last trip to Vegas.
You're good. Is your good friend Phil Hellmuth? Is that who that is?
Yeah, no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was. I didn't really know what to expect with the TDA summit. Tristan and I didn't really talk about it much, and we took a late night flight out there, so I just ended up watching a movie on the way out there. We just kind of got up in the morning and went, and I expected it to be a convention, like a convention is, where you stuff a bunch of people in a room and they talk about stuff. But I was really impressed with how much respect the other TDs held for their positions. It wasn't. It's not a point of vanity. People are genuinely care about how poker tournaments are run and how they can make them better, how to keep things fair. I mean, the interest of the game itself and fairness overall of the game is such a huge element and common theme. And I don't know, maybe just being in that room, it seemed amplified for me. But it was really interesting to be there. I didn't expect it, and it was fairly inspiring.
Cool.
One of the things that they opened with was that they weren't going to have Matt Savage and Jack Ethel. That we're not going to talk about last card off the deck, and which immediately almost a 10-minute conversation went on about last card off the deck.
Well, and what do you mean by that? As far as when people's hand is live or dead, is that what you mean?
Yeah. So prior to the 2015 summit, it was first card off the deck. If you are not at your seat, which is defined by within an arm's reach of your seat, when the first card comes off the deck in the next hand, your hand is dead. And I don't know if it's true or not. It's called the Daniel Negreanu rule, but essentially a lot of players lobbied to have it made as the last card off the deck, because in massive events, these guys sometimes are across the room, they're signing autographs and whatnot, and they just can't get back to their seat in time. But it just opens the door to so many issues, and I'm in the camp where it should be first card off the deck. Get back to your seat in time. It's not a big deal. You pay your bills in time. You stop for red lights. It's just one of those things. It's first card off the deck. If you're not in your seat, be in your seat. Your hand's dead. That's how I feel about it. There's just too many things. You can potentially see other players' hands while cards have already been out in play. While walking up to the table, dealers could slow deal in an effort to make sure that you get your hand. And I just think it opens up the window for several abuses. So while not talking about it, a lot was said about it in a short amount of time.
So the rules shifted in 2015 to be last card off the deck, and that's right. That's where the rule remains.
And that's where it stayed. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
And it probably will. But what I thought was very interesting was there were several TDs that got their respective casinos to pass a house rule to where it is first card off the deck. And as you know, casinos, in almost every casino, house rules will supersede the TDA.
Mm-hmm.
So any casino can follow the TDA and adhere to the TDA, but the TDA will be superseded by any house rule if they're ever in conflict. And so several TDs had their house pass a rule where it's first card off the deck, and I thought that was very interesting. And I've already brought this up for discussion at Running Aces. The problem lies then, if we make the switch, are we the outlier in this whole community, right? And so I really don't know if it's that big of a deal. It's more of a preference. And it gives cause for a lot more, I guess, a lot more has to be watched. And training has to be better. I mean, you have to make sure everybody's on that same page all the time. It's not just a rule that's in place.
Right.
Because it allows, like I said, it just allows for incongruities. So we'll see. We'll see what comes of that. I'm sure there's going to be some good discussions nowadays, is back and forth about for or against it. So, and we have the option too of maybe doing it for dailies, or just not at all. We'll see. We'll see what comes of it.
Right. Okay.
I personally love first card off the deck. That's I don't know why that changed, honestly.
Yeah. No, it seems like it get tricky too if you do some events with first card, some with last card. How does the communication with the dealers and the players, and it seems like you don't want to be giving players even more reason to get upset about their misunderstanding of the rules than they already can.
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Especially if they're coming in from out of town. And a lot of professional players have read and understand the TDA. The TDA rules. So it's not, do you want to create a point of conflict when they come in from out of town to see your casino for the first time? And you're like, well, guess what? We don't follow the TDA on that point.
I have a question about that, Jim, just to interject. So I know it always says, the TDA rules and the house rules can supersede that. For just the average player, I've never gone online and looked up the TDA rules. It's something I've wanted to do just out of curiosity. But if how would I know which rules Aces has different from the TDA rules? Is that something that's available on the website or live in person, or how do I know which rules are different at Aces?
So at Aces, we basically follow the TDA. I pretty much for tournaments, it's basic. I mean, TDA basically dictates what we do.
Okay.
Cash play, there's some variants. But even some of our cash play rules have been altered to mirror the TDA, like oversized chip betting, things like that. So it's pretty hard and fast TDA. I really can't, off the top of my head, think of a single instance where Aces varies from the TDA.
Okay. So if we look up the TDA rules, if we're wondering about the nuances of the of things, we can just go by TDA for the most part. Okay.
For sure. I mean, and that's how every assistant tournament director is trained in. They get their own copy of the TDA. They're expected to read it all, know it all. And of course, it doesn't cover everything. I mean, hence rule number 1, which it just gives TDs the discretion to make calls that fall into gray areas.
Okay.
But for the most part, and if you ever, I believe we have our poker rules posted over by the server station in the poker room.
Okay.
If you ever wanted to read them. But TDA rules, pokertda.com, you can go there and download a PDF of the latest version. And one thing that the TDA does, which I think is cool, is they redline any changes from one summit to the next.
Nice.
So you can see what's been done. And speaking of that, it was interesting to be a part of that. So you start at the beginning and you work your way through. Everything gets discussed. If there's any change, language change, anything, it basically gets voted on. And to be a part of that was interesting, to have my vote count towards the current version of the TDA. It was cool. It was cool, really cool to be a part of that. So anything that you see redline is a lot of changes. Some of the language has changed, been updated. It's no longer all he. You'll see a lot of she or her.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Throughout the whole book. So, but yeah, a lot of the language change was just to help make things a little more clear.
Okay. So beyond the language changes, were there any significant changes that actually impact play this year? Or?
One thing that I liked, like Rule 29, the calling for the clock rule, it reads now, if a TD's judgment if in a TD's judgment reasonable time has passed, he or she may call the clock or approve a clock request by any player in the event. And so, I mean, that's some language. Some of that language is a little older from any player in the event, which means that a player at another table can technically call the clock on another table. But now the TDs themselves have the discretion to call clock, and that's always kind of been an understood thing. And it's always been an understood thing that if a TD ever calls the clock, they better have a very legitimate reason to do so.
Right.
It's never in a TD's interest to work for their own benefit. So if a TD goes and calls the clock and potentially puts a player's hand in jeopardy, they better have a very concrete reason for doing so.
Yeah, okay.
But overwhelmingly, every tournament director at the summit has been experiencing it's not really a new trend, but it's becoming more and more prevalent, and that's stalling and slow play around the money bubble.
Sure. Yep.
And in some instances, like these PokerStars events, they're massive. Circuit events are massive. WPT events, they're massive. And even some of our local events are pretty big, respective to room size and whatnot.
Right.
So when people start stalling, it really damages other players' ability to play against the clock and against the blinds. And so this is an effort to curb some of that. And so another part of that is that the TDs may also adjust the time allowed to take other steps to fit the game and stop persistent delays. Part of that is that prior to reaching the bubble, TDs have the option now to go hand for hand. Okay. So if this becomes a problem, because sometimes stalling will start 5-10 players before the bubble.
Oh, for sure. If you're, a lot of your tournaments, if you have like those big 280s with 6 day ones, and you have, you have 90 to 100 people cash or whatever the number is, and you've got 10, 12 tables, and if you have 4 big blinds, you have every incentive to tank.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm not really that way, but other people are, and it's hard to blame them. I mean, it honestly is, but that they're incented in a sense to tank, and it's so frustrating when you're trying to get hands in, but you kind of get it too.
It is, and I think it's just kind of a natural evolution of the game, and I don't blame a player doing that. I mean, money's at stake. They put their money in the game, and they're trying to protect it, and so they're using something at their disposal to try to do that.
It's within the rules of the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I mean, are you not acting when you're running a big 3-street bluff? No, you're still acting.
Right. Yep.
It's no different if you're tanking on a 3-5 offsuit when action gets to you when you're on the bubble. It's just it's part of the game,
Yeah.
But it has an overwhelmingly negative effect on other players.
Right.
And so, while not pointing people out, we're given some latitude to kind of curb that.
Okay.
Which I think is important. And the other thing is the clock is no longer 1 minute; it's 30 seconds. It's 20 seconds plus a 5-second countdown, which is fantastic.
I think that's fantastic too. I mean, by the time clock gets called, it's been quite a while, and 30 seconds is still a fair amount of time.
For sure, and you'll see. One thing I really liked about like the super high roller balls when they're on TV is you'll see that as soon as the action's on you, you got a minute. You got a minute to decide. And if you need longer, you have X amount of tiles at your disposal, and you can cash them in for extra time. And I think that's a really creative way of doing it. It's a hard way to.
Yeah. The administrative, logistical side of it can be a nightmare.
Absolutely.
Because you're invariably going to have one. They're the other benefit of just having a few different tables. If you get 10, 15 tables running, what are the odds that one of the clocks is not going to work?
Right. Or the dealer doesn't hit it, or well, however it works out. It just
okay. But yeah, that's
a little too difficult to manage. But it is an interesting take on the issue.
Yeah,
and it highlights that there is an issue. So I think Rule 29. Don't expect to see at least at Aces, don't expect to see TDs calling the clock. But if you ever do, at least you'll know that it's within their discretion to do so.
And I suppose with that rule too, if you sense that a whole table is tanking on the bubble, that's where you're saying another table could actually call clock on players on that table.
Right. Well, and as the rule, when calling for clock, as it reads, any player in the event can call clock.
Right. So if we all notice that, hey, the other table's playing half the hands, potentially we could call clock on a player on that other table.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Right. Okay.
Yeah. No, and I've never actually seen that.
Yeah.
And most people probably aren't aware of that rule, but that is how it reads. So
interesting. Okay.
We'll see. I mean, as more people become familiar with the TDA, you're going to see these things happen more and more, and then current rules will then probably get adjusted again, and that's the benefit of having the summit every 2 years, is that we can come back and say this is what's working and this isn't, and maybe just redefine things more clear with language. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay.
Another rule that this was a heated discussion out there, is rule number 57, non-standard and unclear betting. Players use unofficial betting terms and gestures at their own risk. This may be interpreted to mean other than what the player intended, which is interesting. When you're trained in as the tournament director, you're constantly told that you're not there to measure intent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's an important thing, is when you're a player and you see the TD come over, is that they shouldn't be guessing as to what an offending player might have wanted to do. If a declared bet can reasonably have multiple meanings, it will be ruled based on the highest reasonable amount that is less than the pot size before the bet. All right, so that's not entirely clear, but the example they give, no limit hold'em, blinds are 200, 400, and there's 4,900 in the pot.
Yep.
Player declares,
4.
I bet 5.
Or 5, okay.
Yep. With no other clarifying information, the bet is 500. If there is 5,100 in the pot, and the same occurrence happens, the bet is 5,000.
Okay.
And this is how Rule 57 has now been adopted. Savage has been, for years, has been on Twitter saying that it's okay to make calls based on the based on size of the pot. I've never liked it. The original rule was intended to, and here's what changed my mind towards this. The original rule was intended to stop someone from betting 5. They'll say 5, and then size up the table after what their unclear bet, and then decide what it should be. But for being a TD for the last 3+ years, who as the director and what is assistant TD, is every instance where this ruling has occurred, it's been a recreational player, or somebody with less experience saying 5, throwing out a $5,000 chip, and then a seasoned player or a professional player saying, no,
that's 500.
That's 500, because they want to pay less to get to the Turner River, which is fair, but we're not. Originally the TDA, and it still is. It was never designed to penalize players. It's ultimately, the rules of poker are designed to protect players. Instill fairness in the game. So in instances like that, where somebody says 5, they throw out the 5K chip, clearly they meant to bet 5,000, and they get held to the minimum. I mean, there is, I still see both sides of it. There is a learning curve. Be clear with your betting. Anytime you make an unclear bet, you're at the whim of, it's out of your control at this point. The floor gets called over, and it's in the hands of the floor. And so what you intended may or may not hold. I don't like about this is that the example they give, you're such a small discrepancy in the size of the pot. So it's all related to the size of the chip that gets thrown out, or the size of the bet, technically, the 5, the unclear bet. And never, and in fact, the gal sitting next to me in the convention yelled out, "You want us to count the pot?" You know, and I was saying the same thing to Tristan. You never want to give an indication of the pot size. So coming over to make a ruling like this, now we're going to have to eyeball the pot. Well, there could be chips underneath that we're not seeing.
Right.
Do we ask the dealer to recount action, which then again gives out the information of the pot? We'll never, and at Aces, you're never going to see us count down a pot or break one down and count it to make this ruling. And it really shouldn't be too big of a deal.
Yeah, normally it won't be that close, but
nobody ever says 5 and throws out a $50,000 chip.
Right.
You know, so it's going to always revolve around these particular denominations.
Yeah.
Right. So pot size is going to be within a pretty well-defined range, right? So when we're going to come up and make these rulings, we should be able to eyeball them. But the training that I've put in for this is that you're never announcing the size of the pot. You're not going to give indications of the pot. When the hand is complete, you can then explain Rule 57 of the TDA allows us to make that ruling based on the size of the pot.
Right.
But when making the ruling, we make the ruling and let action complete. So that's how that's going to carry out. But there was a lot of back and forth, and I don't know if you saw Tristan's hashtags that started going out on Twitter of "Can you live with it?"
No, I didn't.
It was kind of funny, but that's how some of the voting actually occurred. Was can you live with this? You know, and until gosh, I can't remember his name. I believe he worked at Commerce, but until he explained. He said, you know, when you make this ruling, how does it always go down? Is it one guy running an angle shoot, the better? It's never the better running the angle shot. It's always an inexperienced player and then a seasoned player saying, well, no, we have to hold him to the minimum. So
right.
I don't hate the change. I just don't. Again, this is another rule where it could be ambiguous.
Right.
You know. It opens the door to other circumstances occurring.
And the real, I mean, you know, that's where you guys have to say what's the law and how do you interpret that and what discretion do you have. I think, you know, just take this chance to let players know, especially recreational players, just save all the headache and just announce what you're trying to do, or be really clear. You know, if you have exact change, fine, but if you need to announce it, just say the denomination. You're not, you know, you're not saving that much time by saying 5 rather than 500 or even 5,000. It's one or two syllables.
For sure, and it's never an efficiency thing. You know, it's a rec player that just finally got comfortable in his first big event, and he might have a good hand and he wants to bet 5,000. He throws it out there with a little authority and says 5.
Yeah, and I'm not even. To me, I'm not ripping on players for doing that. I'm just saying I've seen way too many players do exactly what you're talking about. They're trying to bet 5,000 into a 8,000 chip pot. Somebody calls them on it. They make it 500. They get 6 callers.
Yeah,
and then they lose. You know, and I feel so bad for them. Yeah, and I just think it was avoidable, but you know, clearly everybody at the table knew what they were trying to do, but they're, you know, subjected to the TDA rule. So just as a rec player, just kind of always, you know, make it easy on the dealer and the floor, and do the best you can to just be clear on what you're trying to do.
Absolutely, and that's usually my final statement on any ruling that revolves bet clarity, is that just please make your betting clear.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to bet 14,000, say 14,000.
Right.
You know, there's really, if you state what your raise is, and I understand why some players don't want to say it because they feel they could give something away.
Verbal tells, sure.
For sure, fair enough. That's for real. So I'm not going to say that they have to say it. But if you're going to bet 14,000, then put 14,000 out.
Correct. Yep.
Right. Just take one more second to think about what you're actually doing. Make sure your bets are clear, and now your betting is always in your own hands and not at the whim of a tournament director or another player.
Right. And I'm always the guy at the table that's like, come on, we all know what he was trying to do. There's no more action, whatever. But at the end of the day, the rule's the rule. But, you just kind of want to, everybody knows it's so obvious what they were trying to do. But the rule is the rule,
Yeah.
So what else you got? What other changes are underway?
Well, the last thing I wanted to mention was recommended procedure number 8, or RP-8. And this revolves hand-for-hand procedures. So when you reach the bubble, you get to the point where we're going to go hand-for-hand, finish with the hands you're on. We're going to go hand-for-hand now. And one of the examples they give is that they want this to be consistent. If, say, you're paying out 50 spots, and on the last hand before going hand for hand, you lose 3 people.
Right.
Let me make this a little more clear. You're paying out 50 spots. There's 53 people left in the tournament, and you lose 3 people on that hand. Those 3 people are eligible to split 50th place. If that makes sense.
Yep.
Say you're on the bubble and you're paying 50 spots and there's 51 players and 3 of them go out, then they will split 50th and 49th. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and this is kind of a situation that I was just in. Just a quick shout out. I played your Omaha tournament the other night for the first time. I've never played Omaha before. Not even once. Or PLO. Yeah, I played PLO. I cashed in it, which was sweet, obviously. But maybe this is where the question came up, because we were on the bubble. We were paying 4, and there's 5 of us left. And the 5th place guy, the short stack shoved in, and then I had a decision to make because there was somebody else still in the pot. And I asked, because I say, well, okay, hypothetically, what happens if we both bust right here? So that was one of the questions. That's maybe what you're getting at is would we split 4th place money, or would it be based on who had the most chips at the time of busting? Is that the situation that you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. But I sent the yes but coming. Because it's kind of the thought, right? There's one unpaid position and 2 people bust. Or is that somehow different than the example you had with 50?
The busting player. Let me just read this.
Okay.
If enough players bust on the current hand to break into the money, the busting players will be eligible for a share of the places paid. So place or places paid on the current hand. So that indicates that it could go deeper than just last place money. Right. So yeah, that does look like it.
So what would have happened there is if we both busted there, it wouldn't matter how many chips we each had. We would have split 4th place money.
I think here's the difference, though, is that I think it has to be a multi-table bubble.
Oh.
Because anytime it's a single table,
you can observe everything.
You're not going hand for hand.
Right. Every hand is hand for hand.
Right. Every hand is hand for hand, and I don't know if that's
okay.
Maker or not, but when you're not going hand for hand, placement is determined by stack size.
Okay.
Right, so that's how that's normally done. I guess that does give this a little gray area.
So the rule though, as you're interpreting, is really for where there's more than one table, on the bubble, which is most tournament situations.
Right.
Then it doesn't matter the chip stacks. You just chop up whatever payout money was paid out.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me.
How I'm interpreting this is it has to be a multi-table hand for hand.
Okay.
You know what? In all fairness, I will send some emails out tomorrow and see if I can't get some clarification on that. But I'm pretty sure that's the intent of this rule.
Okay.
So,
that's cool. All right. Yeah, I think that's important to know as people are on the bubble.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a super. I mean, that's a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Big difference. Yeah.
And that's a rule change, you're saying. So, or is that just a clarification of that rule?
I think that's a clarification of that rule, but it is red line, so I'm assuming that there
change some wording.
Yeah. And also they're recommending a 2-minute clock runoff. So when you have big events, it can take anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes to finish a single hand. And so this also applies back to stalling and slow play. But the 2-minute runoff can sort of alleviate all of those pains.
I like that. I played the Daily Deep Stack out in Vegas, the 235, where we had like 1,300 entrants, and so by the time we got the money, they paid the top 15%, so it was like 180 players, so we had 18 tables on the bubble, and literally it took like I think 4 hands to have the bubble break, and it was like a level and a half.
Right.
It was like 40 minutes or something crazy.
Right.
Yeah. So in this case. Oh, sorry. So in this case, they would just say, okay, you played 4 hands, we'll run off 8 minutes, basically?
Sure. What they would like you to do is to do it each hand, not batch it. So you could count, we did 10 hands, and then we take, because what they want is, if you do go through into the next blinds, they want you to start playing at the new blind level. Right. The 2-minute runoff. So they don't want to play it all at the same level and then take 20 minutes off if you played 10 hands and now you're starting in the middle of the next level when you should have already been in the next level.
So you just run the clock, and once 2 minutes have passed, then you pause it for the rest of that hand.
So you pause the clock.
Yep.
You run the hand. As soon as the hand's over, you take 2 minutes off.
Yep.
And so the clock is never running. It's just 2 minutes come on and off, or just come off after every hand.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I do too. But there is some wiggle or some discrepancies that I do have with it, and in daily tournaments, because you rarely have a multi-table bubble. Like even in our free rolls, we'll have 3 table bubbles,
right?
And a lot of times those are fairly short-handed. Say,
so it's a 2-minute required. Is it a 2-minute required runoff?
So yeah, it's a 2-minute runoff, right? So.
I figured it'd be like 2 minutes or less. Like if it took less time, you would just take less.
No, it's just 2 minutes.
Oh yeah, okay.
So several big rooms and big tours and tournaments, they've been doing this and with great success. And I can see why, especially when you have massive bubbles like what you just explained. Right. You have 18, 20, 22 tables for the bubble.
Right.
Even 10 tables can be a big bubble,
For sure.
Tables could eat up a ton of time because every table is going to play a hand out differently. But on our daily events, a lot of times the bubble is 2 tables and it's 11-handed total. You got 5 on one table and 6 on the other.
Right.
And hands last 30 seconds. Everybody folds, next hand. Right? And so you could literally run off 2 levels in the course of 15 or 20 hands, and depending on the tournament. And it's rather unfair to the players. So what I've recommended, and what's probably going to happen, is that we are going to apply the 2-minute runoff to events that are multi-day events. So any of our main events that occur month to month,
right?
Like a 280 signature series, or when the MSPT comes, and then for our daily events, limit it to when we have bubbles that are 4 tables or more.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. Okay.
So if you have a 3-table bubble, just let the clock run, because you're going to have, say you've got 7 players at each table and you're paying out 20. It just makes sense that you're not taking that 2 minutes when each hand is only lasting 30 seconds, 45 seconds.
Right.
Just not fair to the players. So.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I can see some sort of a limit on number of tables before the rule applies.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of like
that'll get written up and explained.
Okay.
Somehow, I intend on publishing these 3 specific points on Facebook, Twitter, and the website, and then along with how Running Aces will approach each one of those situations.
Yeah, fantastic.
So, and that was kind of the point of coming on here with you too, is just to kind of give a heads up to the local community so they can know what to expect. And some people may not always most people, I never followed the TDA until I was actually a tournament director.
Right.
So, I always relied on my TD to tell me what's going on.
Well, man, I appreciate the update, though. This is good. It's helpful to kind of see behind the curtain a little bit and know some of the things that you guys are wrestling with. And I know, players can get frustrated or whatever, but I think it helps to kind of to see the issues. And for a lot of them, there are two sides to the issue, and I think that's where we as players need to give grace to the dealers, grace to the floors. Recognizing that we're putting you guys in a tough spot. You're being asked to judge in a situation where you can actually see two sides of it, and ultimately you have to make a decision, and that's not a great spot to be in. So, appreciate what you're doing, appreciate the energy and the passion around trying to make it the best experience for all of us. I really do appreciate that, and I think we can do a better job of honoring you guys in that role. I think one question while I have you though, Jim. All right, before you go,
Yeah.
I've got the one question that I always get confused on. It's the only thing that I kind of keep running into, and I know there's a difference between cash and tournaments, but as you know, I don't play cash at all. It's the what qualifies as a raise where the action can be reopened. Is it half of a bet or is it a full bet? You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like say the blinds are 200, 400, somebody goes to 1,200, so they raised by 800, and then somebody goes all in for 1,900, so they go in for 700 more.
Right.
And it gets back around to the original person who raised to 1,200. Can they re-raise, or can they only?
No, they cannot.
So it's got to be a full bet in tournaments?
So in no limit, specifically no limit,
Okay.
tournament or cash. So this does not include spread limit or any limit poker. In no limit, the bet must be a full bet to reopen action.
Oh, okay. So that's the same for cash and tournaments.
Yes.
Okay, 'cause I think all the players have different understandings. Like around the table, you hear everybody saying, "Well, I think it's this. I think it's this." And okay,
where the confusion comes, and you got to remember, Minnesota is largely a limit poker state because of our bet caps. So, primarily people in Minnesota that are playing cash are playing limit poker.
Oh, so that's what you're saying. So the difference is it's not cash versus tournament. It's the fact that cash is limit and the tournaments are no limit.
Versus no limit. So in limit poker, half of a bet is considered a bet.
Oh, okay.
Right? So if you're playing 4-8 Hold'em and it's the blind, it's 2 and 4 and somebody's all in for 6, that's a bet. Somebody can make it 8.
Okay.
Or say you're on the turn and it's you guys are you're what did I say? We're playing a 2-4 game?
Yeah.
4-8 game. Playing a 4-8 game. So now all the betting's in $8 increments. And the guy opens, he's all in for 6. Another guy can raise. That $6 is considered a bet.
Okay.
Right? If he's all in for 4, it's considered a bet. And so somebody can make a raise. And if the raise would be 12.
Yep.
But they can't complete and then raise. There are certain rooms that allow that, but that's
good to know now. So because it seems like every tournament I encounter this, and players are always confused. I can be an ambassador for that. So I think a lot of players are thinking, which is what I absorbed. Then it's the difference between cash and tournament, but that really has nothing to do with it. It's just the fact that cash is limit and tournament no limit, basically in Minnesota. So in anything no limit, it's got to be a full bet. I like
That's
it.
correct.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, since I had the man on Skype, I'm like, I can't pass up this opportunity to say, all right, here's the one that I keep getting confused on. Help me out, brother.
It's fair because I get called over for that one all the time.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. All the time.
Well, anything else you want to share with the Rec Poker folks before we let you go?
No, that's about it. I sent out a tweet over the weekend saying I was binging on Rec Poker podcasts, and I really was. And it's after becoming a TD, being the tournament manager at Aces for the last 2 years, I'm really burnt out on poker.
Yeah.
It's such a big part of my life now, and I never play. I've got a Sunday night game in my garage sometimes when we're not all too busy, but I don't even really have the heart for it. I have read so many books, and I was working on my game, and
Yeah.
Back before Black Friday, I had built my first roll on Poker Stars, and everything was really working on poker, and so when I hear people talk about strategy now, I'm just like, oh gosh, poker, and I just want to run. And it was so difficult, but I just got a new Apple TV, and I was looking at the podcast thing, and I see, Brian Soja, he's my best friend,
Yeah,
one of my best friends, and so I'm like, well, I got to listen to Soja's podcast on Rec Poker, his interview on Rec Poker. So I started with his, and I moved to Fox, then Schneids, and I just kind of kept going, and it made me like poker again.
Uh-oh.
Like, I remember why I started playing in the first place. And it was really interesting. I really thought the stuff that you were asking Fox and the answers he was giving were really interesting.
Yeah.
It's not stuff we all haven't heard before, but it just something about hearing it again from Fox and on the show. I just it kind of sparked something. So.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it was cool, and I'm glad to be a part of Rec Poker. I'm glad we got this put through with Aces, and that you can keep this going. It's I think you're really doing a good thing. So.
Well, thanks. I'm just doing it. I'm not professional. I don't really know what I'm doing, but it's a cool opportunity to talk to a lot of really good players, a lot of really good people, and I think as you and I have talked, and we got some really cool things coming up. In the next few weeks, we're doing this Jonathan Little Book Club, and then after that. I think people are really going to like the formatting change that we're going to do, and really focus on specific things, and kind of on a consistent basis hear from the folks like Fox and Soja and Jonathan Little and Kuvang and Aaron Johnson and all of these guys, Mike Schneider, on a regular basis, and really dig in deep to some strategy things, because I think what people have really enjoyed so far is it's kind of been a get to know you. You hear some of the strategy, some of the ways people think generally about the game, and that's good. And I think people have liked to kind of feel like they got to know these folks. But now as we go forward, starting to really get into some things that I think are really going to help people improve their game and take it to the next level, I think is going to be a really kind of a cool formatting change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm a firm believer in change. So
yeah,
anytime. I mean, you never really want to rest on your laurels, and I really think you've done a great job. And part of that's just your obvious childlike love of the game.
It is childlike. I love the game. I really do.
Yeah, it's so obvious, and it's really kind of contagious, because you're not out trying to hustle anybody.
No.
You're just here to try to play a really cool strategy game and learn as much as you can. And you're such a genuine guy. So I mean, you really become a good ambassador for the poker community here in Minnesota.
Well, that means a lot. I appreciate that. Yeah, you only have so many hours in the day, and for me, this is my hobby. I don't fish like I used to fish, and so now this has become my hobby. And why do something you don't really enjoy? And I do love it, and hopefully I will for years to come. And
yeah,
hanging out with folks like you at places like Aces certainly helps.
Fair enough.
All right, bud. Well, we'll let you go, and thanks for all your time.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll have you on again in the future.
All right, Steve. Thanks.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Jim LeVoir. Thank you, Chris Hanson. Thanks to all of you listeners of the Rec Poker Podcast. Just delighted to be doing this. This is just super fun for me, so thanks for that. Next week, we're going to be starting our Jonathan Little Book Club book study. I think you're going to enjoy those conversations as well. And then going forward, we're going to be doing our formatting change with some deeper dive into some strategy things with great input from our sponsors, including Running Aces, Next Level Poker, the Poker is Fun Tour, and PokerCoaching.com with Jonathan Little, Chris Fox Wallace, Mike Schneider, Brian Soja, and a bunch of others too. So with that, follow us on Twitter at RecPoker, join the Facebook group RecPoker, or email me directly, Steve Fredlund at gmail.com. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, input, ideas, whatever it might be, we're here, we're open, and we're happy to be in conversation with you. One other quick thing, a reminder, All In for Africa coming up October 28th at Running Aces. It's going to be a great time. If you want to get involved there, either donating a prize, playing as a bounty, or just showing up and playing, man, we'd love to have you. Get in touch. We do have a Facebook event, All In for Africa 7, that has all of the details, or again, reach out to me. All right, thanks much. Take care.